Hello from Clare, London, contacting you from Clare Space, a very cluttered area where I do my writing. I've never wanted to be on TV or anything like that, but I've been tempted online by the wonderful team at Sinfully Sexy, who are featuring my latest story, Dear Alex. So I'm just going to read a little bit from it for you today, talk a little bit about it, and if it all goes well, I might be tempted to do more in the future, so be warned. I'll give you the blurb first. Alex Palmer writes the Dear Alex Agony Uncle column for Meant for Men, a magazine aimed at gay men's life and issues. What started as a genuine and groundbreaking feature has become a snark fest due to Alex's boredom and personal cynicism. His respect for the correspondence has dwindled away in direct relation to his own self-respect as a journalist. He no longer believes in his reader's search for a soulmate, or in his own column's headline, Is He Really the One? In the early days, Robbie Cook was Alex's co-presenter on the magazine. They'd been lovers too. But unlike Alex, Robbie still sees the anguish and need behind the letters they receive. He wants to help the writers, rather than turn their situations into journalistic entertainment. He and Alex may still have to work together, but their fundamental disagreement on how to run the column tore them apart as romantic partners. Excess drinking and a succession of casual lovers is wearing Alex out, yet he's in denial. He's convinced he doesn't need Dear Alex to set him straight about what's wrong with his life. But when he's alerted to the fact that Robbie may be in danger, he realises that what he's really missing is his ex-lover's care, compassion and love. The problem is, by the time Alex is desperate to make amends, Robbie may have already moved on. The story is in Alex's voice, in his particularly snarky voice. He started the column so that men would have someone to talk to about their personal issues with genuine, sympathetic advice, but it's just gradually turned into a tabloid entertainment feature. I read a lot of those gossip entertainment magazines, usually at the fish and chip shop, when I'm waiting for my order, because they have them there for the patrons. I wouldn't buy them, I'm afraid. For me, the writing style, though, is fascinating. It's seductive, it's skillful, but it is ultimately unsatisfying. I love wit and banter, we all do, and I love a good writer's talent. I mean, I personally considered going into journalism at one time, before the lure of figures overcame the lure of words and I became an accountant. But I wouldn't want that kind of sharp comment at someone else's expense to be my style. And that's what Dear Alex is all about. Alex uses that style for cheap humour. It's about how he's lost his early principles, his friend Robbie's trust and love, and he's at risk of losing his own self-esteem. Alex starts out the story as a cheap trick himself. But hopefully, by the end of it, he's found the way back to redemption and Robbie. So here's an excerpt. It's been edited for some bad language and adult references. Found that quite difficult in this story, but I hope I've done well. Dear Alex, I really need some advice. I've never written to a magazine before, and I'm not sure my boyfriend would understand. Of course, he's totally committed to me, he always tells me so, but odd things have been happening. Last month, when I called him on one of his convention trips, there was a man's voice in the background. They were in his hotel bedroom together. My boyfriend explained how mix-ups happen on the room numbers all the time. But then there are all the dating magazines that come to the house. Something to do with identity theft, he says, and I know that happens. He says I'm getting paranoid. But last week I found a pair of designer briefs that don't belong to any of us in his overnight case. I suppose I'm asking, just like your column strapline says, Dear Alex, is he really the one? Robbie frowned slightly and pushed his tousled curly hair back behind his ears, his pencil clutched tightly between his fingers. Despite the late hour, he was still in his office clothes. He'd come straight to my flat at the end of the normal working day, bringing with him our latest burdensome bundle of correspondence. The flat was well heated, and he'd slipped open the first few buttons of his shirt, exposing his neck and the pale torso below. Right now his throat bobbed sharply, as if he'd swallowed back a retort. I was distracted by his movements for a brief moment. The graceful twist of his wrists, the strong stretch of his neck. Distracted by the layer of stubble already forming on his chin and upper lip. No one could deny he was a good-looking man. There was a quiet boldness in his expression that many people missed, initially thinking him too reserved. I reckoned he didn't make enough of himself. I knew the boldness extended to far more than just his expression. Far more. Our relationship went back a long way, and not just in the office. Layla? Robbie? I raised an eyebrow and waved the letter in my hand. What about this one? No, Robbie said quietly, obviously deciding he was the one to answer. His lips pursed. This one isn't suitable for publication. What? Layla employed me for copy because she wasn't necessarily known for her own literary skills. Her voice was sharp and loud, despite the fact we were both right next to her. Robbie, that's my decision, not yours. This is just what we need. Some poor sucker who doesn't know when he's being taken for a ride, so dear Alex can give his own special brand of advice. Robbie winced. No way. It's not a good one for the feature. His voice was also sharp, and I recognised the determined set of his jaw. His body was tight with tension. Trouble was brewing. Oh, I don't know, I said, enjoying the sound of my slow, cynical drawl. I dropped down into one of the chairs at the table, nursing my third bottle of beer. These evenings could be long and arduous. In fact, they usually were. So I saw nothing wrong in easing the way as best I could, with plenty of alcohol. Okay, so the story's nothing new, but it's always worth revisiting the common problems. Let's face it, it's a perfect example of how the boyfriend's not really the one, but the sucker can't admit it. I winked at Layla. Maybe not sexy enough for the magazine, though. Any other clues, like mysterious hang-ups on the phone? Subscription invitations to singles clubs, arriving on the very day that sucker attends his evening choral society practice? Alex! Layla looked delighted. She wouldn't be shocked. No, those days were long behind us. She revelled in my outrageous style. Robbie glared at me. Alex, that's all rather glib, don't you think? I widened my eyes with mock innocence. Maybe. I've read all that in these letters at some stage or another. I saw Robbie frown again. Okay, so maybe not the choral society practice. I think that's something from my own dating experience. Alex, he muttered, shaking his head, this isn't about you. The Dear Alex column is a genuine relationship advice column, not some opportunity for you to indulge your own personal drama class. It was Layla's turn to raise an eyebrow, amused by Robbie's protest. She glanced between us, grinning, a rather twisted sense of humour ripe for mischief. Back off, Robbie, I said, mildly enough. I can recognise good copy, the same as Layla. His gaze was making me slightly uncomfortable, and I'd be annoyed if that happened in my own flat. I'd been more than hospitable, letting the team use it, so we could sort through the letters in some kind of privacy. More than tolerant, too, when the sight of Robbie relaxing in my chair and using my kitchen and stretching out on my couch wasn't always comfortable for me. Funny how tonight that thought caused me emotional indigestion. Robbie pushed his chair back, the sudden sound breaking my train of thought. I don't agree with either of you in this case. Meant for Men welcomes communication from our readers about their personal concerns and queries, he quoted from the column's introduction. Be reassured you're in the trusted hands of your very own professional, compassionate agony aunt. Or uncle, Layla smirked. She glanced across at me again and we grinned conspiratorially. She was obviously quite happy to ignore Robbie's concerns. "So what'll you say, Alex, to Sucker?" I shrugged. "Tell him it's time to wake up and smell the coffee. That boyfriend's been caught with his boxers down around his ankles and it looks like they belong to another man. That it obviously suits him to play on Sucker's paranoia. It means he can have his cake and eat it." Layla sniggered and I continued on a roll now. That maybe Sucker deserves all he gets because his devotion is so misguided. He's downright pitiful. Robbie made a noise of disgust and stood up from the table. "This is what it's all about," I said to him brusquely. I shouldn't have to tell him, of course, because he'd been at this game for as long as I had. We'd been working together since the beginning of Dear Alex. But recently Robbie had been showing worrying signs of confrontation and, God forbid, distaste. After all, I was only providing what the public wanted, wasn't I? Thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed it. Speak to you again soon.